This is the Create Your Own Life Show, episode 450 with Sydney Wong.
You can't do everything. You're not going to be good at everything, but you do have a list of people within your network or within new people you meet or anybody who would be able to give you advice on very specific things and situations. Just make sure not to ask the wrong person for the wrong things.
You're listening to the Create Your Own Life podcast, the show to help you create life on your terms. 3 days a week, Jeremy Ryan Slate interviews the most successful people in business and in life to help you create the life you want to create. Welcome to Life Creation Nation.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. I want to offer you guys a free book and a free month of Audible, and I want to tell you guys what I'm reading right now. I actually just finished Aaron Mahnke's World of Lore book. He actually has 2 of them in this series, so you're definitely going to want to check those out if you're interested in anything weird, creepy, and a little bit historical. And if you haven't listened to the Lore podcast, or you have, this is the guy from that show. So you're going to want to head over to jeremyryanslate.com/book and pick up one of the 2 World of Lore books today. What is up, everyone? Jeremy here, and welcome back to this latest episode of the Create Your Own Life show. I'm really excited for the episode we have today because we're going to dive into something that I really did not have a lot of ideas about, and that's basically the idea of venture funding or getting funding for your startup business, which for me is a bunch of words floating around my head I didn't quite understand. So we're going to start out by figuring out what a lot of that stuff means, if you really need it, and if it's really going to be something to get your business to the next level. If it is, what you have to know to do to make it happen. But after that, we're actually going to dive into some really cool things like how to determine the right type of advice to ask, how to actually take your time and figure out who's the right person to spend it with, which I think is something that a lot of us struggle with. So I really had a great time hanging out with Sydney Wong today. And this is a really great episode from VenturX and Sydney Wong. And guys, before we jump into it, I want to remind you guys to subscribe for free in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you guys are loving this show, do me a favor and leave us a 5-star review. It's one of the things that helps more people to discover us. Without further ado, let's get into this interview with Sydney Wong. Hey, what's up, everybody? Jeremy here, and guys, I'm very excited for today's guest, as we're going to dive into something a little different than we have in the past. Today we have with us Sydney Wong, and she is the founder and CEO of VenturX, a startup benchmarking platform that prepares and connects startups with investor funding. Inspired by a courageous and life-altering experience in Silicon Valley, she bootstrapped her vision to help the startups of tomorrow. Today, VenturX has over $200 million of investor funding to help give out to the most promising and prepared startups in the world. You can find out more over at www.venturex.ca. Welcome to the Create Your Own Life podcast, Sydney Wong.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Sydney. And we're definitely going to dive a little bit into your story today because you and I have chatted a bit in the past, and it's really intriguing what you're doing. But I want to ask you just first and foremost, just because this is a really interesting point, as a platform that helps startups get funding, you've actually decided not to take funding 4 times. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as we work in our particular industry, in the investment early stage startup industry, it is really great for us to be able to see all the paths of success and failure and what it looks like. So if you see funding as just kind of an overall journey, the time to take funding has to do with you asking yourself and your team, when is the right time for these new characters to kind of come into my journey and help me along? And when do I really need it? What is it used for? All of these things that people don't seem to always think about when it's their very first time, but it is super important. You don't want to take it too early because when you rise fast, you could fail fast. You don't want to take it too late because then you'd be suffering. And you always, of course, want to make sure that all the things in place are there to provide you the most value long-term for you and your company. And also that that is the right people to provide you the strategic value that you are looking for. So for first-time startups, that is really important. And so when we were offered during those specific times, we were offered four different times. And at those times, we were still way too early. So our valuation would be really, really bad if we had taken it at that time, because we didn't really need it at the time. We were still trying to prove out our concepts, still trying to, close some of the bigger deals in order to prove out those concepts and make sure that we are a right fit in the market space that we're in.
Very cool. We're going to dive a little bit more into that in a little while, because now I have a whole bunch of follow-up questions to that. But first, let's kind of preface it with actually your journey, because as I said in the intro, your journey is very important to, actually what we're doing here. So Sydney, what's your story?
So I worked in marketing automation and in technology. And so I did that for several years. I did my MBA in Paris and my bachelor's at McGill in Canada. I am Canadian. This is important.
Nice.
To the story. And so then I had a friend who said if I was very serious about working.
Which I will say, first of all, I'm noticing there's a lot of entrepreneurs in tech that are Canadian. So I don't know if that's like a trend or what.
It is a trend. We have a lot of great research and development grants and tax subsidies here.
Got it.
So there is a movement of people just moving north,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had a friend who said if I was very serious about learning about tech and startup, I got to come to Silicon Valley, which is where he lived. So I did. And within about 10 days, I actually bought a plane ticket and I moved down and moved in with him.
Wow.
And so then I stayed there basically until I couldn't live there any longer due to visa issues. I was close to working for Tesla. I was meeting with all these different kinds of great startups and everything. And then I kind of fell in love with them. I kind of fell in love with the target market I wanted to work for and service,
Absolutely.
And yeah, you got to always find the people and the things that you want to do forever. What wakes you up in the morning. And so then I came back to Canada after all my amazing visa issues and apartment hunting in San Francisco. That was really fun. And then I bootstrapped my way across Canada in order to meet with all of the different kinds of startups, investors, accelerators that I could find and find out exactly what their need and pain points were. So investors nowadays, because startups are such a hot trend, they are getting completely over solicited by all of these startups, most of which are not a good fit or not prepared. And then startups always have trouble with getting to the next level, finding out what the next level is, and of course, getting funding. So there is this big gap in the industry, especially in early stage, where you really need help the most. And that's kind of where we come in. And to really help close that gap and make the startups' goals just a little bit more reachable.
Absolutely. Very interesting. So I want to go back to a couple different things here, because this actually, like I said, fits in very, very well, with what we were just talking about in the intro there as well. So you were talking about there's kind of different places, you were saying in your business's journey, and you're also saying there's different places in other businesses' journeys when they should consider funding and things like that. So I'm curious to hear from your standpoint, what are those, I guess, benchmarks when you want to kind of say, okay, it's time to take funding, and what kind of things are you weighing in that period?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very unique art form, but at the same time, you can kind of see it in a black and white kind of way when it comes to asking people for money for the first time, especially when, a big amount of money, whether it be in the millions or the hundreds of thousands or whichever it may be. So the amount of risk that an investor takes or chooses to take, right, would be inversely proportional to whatever the value that you're giving them is in terms of the investment. So in order to diminish or lower that risk, you want to have as much traction, as much users, engagement, or revenue as you can to show. Even if you don't have revenue at an early stage, you can still show traction. So amongst my favorite stories in terms of startups that I found is actually the story of Dropbox. So they created a demo video. They didn't even build a cloud system because Dropbox is...
Oh, is this the one that went on Reddit?
Yes, exactly. So
I know this story.
They did everything that was organic and free because they had no money, right? And they built so much traction for guys who could have built the technology themselves, right? But they didn't have to, and it would be really expensive. So they made this like demo video and then they just posted it on all these different places and they got 15,000 signups before they started building. That is an amazing amount of traction to show that the market really, really wanted more space in order to put their data somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of thing that that I think that we need to kind of go back to. We need to take a step back, and understand. Well, it's not just the idea. It's about the person. It's about the execution. But really, what are you doing that you can do today to help build up that traction? So then you can attract investors at the right stage for the right valuation.
That makes sense. And one of the things that is occurring in that stage too, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is, you're also deciding, I guess, what percentage do you want to keep as well? Like as the person, starting the company or the team starting the company, I guess, what does that look like? And do you see a lot of teams, I guess, setting aside percentages in the beginning for when they get there? Or what do you see like occurring for a lot of teams, I guess, when they get to that point?
Yeah, so many successful business owners and, millionaires that I'm sure you've had on your show, they would always tell you these different tactics for negotiation, and they're always the same. The first and most important one being coming in with a plan, right? You know where your lowest level and your highest level is going to be. You know where the line is going to be in terms of what you've agreed upon with your founding members. And so that's kind of where you always need to start, right? And how it negotiates and how it becomes, your middle point is where the end of the negotiation comes. But what is good to know is that nowadays there are lots of different conditions when it comes to negotiating with investments. So the conditions could be doing certain pilot projects that are beneficial to the investors' other portfolio companies, for example. They want to do trial runs or beta runs with their other portfolio companies with your product or system, or having a debt that converts into equity later in order to lower the risk, or to have a combination of debt and equity in creative ways, or things like giving them office space or giving them an incubator space, or so there's lots of different ways to value it. But it's kind of it's the most important thing is always just to go in with your plan.
That makes a ton of sense. And one of the things you mentioned as well is you were talking about this idea of really deciding like if there's a next level, and if there is, what does that look like in terms of looking with growing your business and taking on funding and things like that. So I guess, what things do you look at to determine, I guess like a growth ceiling for a business? Is it there or is it higher to really decide if, how that goes in with funding?
Yeah, so common mistakes that startups have, and we find that, you're either going to be fundable now or fundable later,
right?
Is kind of come in with a preconceived notion. There are many startups that we talk to who tell us what investors are looking for without ever having pitched once. So that's a real conversation we have all the time, and that really does hold them back because they're not really getting themselves out there, but they're also not really gaining the experience from experts. And so going back to what is that next level, what is important to us is the way that we track traction. So with other investors and serial entrepreneurs, we've come up with these metrics that track your product market fit, your financial runway, your conversion, and your engagement. So these are very high level and basic metrics that everyone should have in order to understand where they need to go, right? And unlike school, you don't have somebody telling you what is required. And oftentimes you can't even reach these people to get the chance to tell you what is required, right? And so then that's where we bench these metrics, because it provides more transparency for the startups to understand what they need to have before they walk into the room.
Absolutely. So I want to take a look at, why would, I guess, an entrepreneur or a business or a startup seeking funding, like, why would they come to, I guess, VenturX as opposed to, any of those other firms out there? Like, what do you think sets you guys apart from everybody else in your space?
Yeah, so our mission really is to help the early stage startups, so those in around seed funding, so between 100,000 to just about $2 million in funding. And those that we work with tend to usually be first time entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
But what really sets us apart, besides the fact that not a lot of people are in this particular space, is that we are our mission is to provide transparency into the market, which is why we bring crowdsourced information and benchmarking information into the market. So nowadays, what's coming?
Could you just define benchmarking for me real quick? I'm sorry, this is a term I don't understand.
No, it's okay. So it's okay. So if you had let's say a food delivery service, okay? So there's tons of food delivery apps in your city and mine. And of the four metrics, the important metric for you actually is engagement. It's how often people are coming back to order more food, right? And so engagement is defined as basically retention and usage. They're coming back and they're using. But in terms of actual conversion, if that metric is low, that's okay. If your engagement is high, then that's great. But if it's the other way around, it's not so good for your particular subcategory, your type of business. And so then you'd be able to see what the other food delivery apps, are doing. So
Got it. So it's like basically like a scorecard that measures you up against other people in your space, so you kind of have a good idea of where you sit.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, cool. So now continue. I just wanted to before you kind of lose me, I wanted to make sure I'm still tracking with you. Go ahead.
And so then we have that as per the different kinds of industries and different startups and different funding amounts and stages. Because right now, all you have, if you don't know, where to start, is that you are really comparing yourself to like the Walmarts or like the Domino's or the world, and it's not really fair because you're a startup. So you need to compare yourself with startup metrics, and also you need to see where you are at when you go into the room for the investors, because that way you can, if you have really good engagement metrics, you're going to talk about that. You're going to talk about how you're so much better than the market because that's your competitive advantage. And this is why. You see, really building onto that story, but building onto that story, you have to have, real, table stakes.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this then. We mentioned, I think this is really cool because I think we've really fleshed out a lot of, what you do and what the market looks like. So we talked about that, like 4 times you guys decided you weren't going to take funding. Is that something that's in your future? Like, do you see it out there, or do you see you guys being able to build this without funding? Like, is that something you see happening?
Yeah, we do tend to take funding in the future. Absolutely.
Okay.
For our business.
Got it. Totally makes sense. Awesome. So I want to come back to you then, Sydney, a little bit and take a look, a little bit deeper into you as the entrepreneur. What is something that you believed, let's say at maybe 20 years old, that you don't believe now?
What do I believe at 20 years old that I don't believe now? That is a very good question. So, I believe a lot of things I still believe now, probably because my mentality of never losing your childlike sense of wonder, I find it really difficult to kind of let go. I think that one of the things is, like, grown-ups don't know everything. I like when I was younger in university, because that's the age you're in university, right? I really do, and the reason that I was able to just like absorb everything like a sponge was because I believed everybody knew everything. Everybody knew everything, and I could learn everything from people, right? And then as you grow older, I think that the whole grown-ups don't know everything is something that instills your self-confidence when you are experiencing different things through career, work, and also being able to research things as quickly as possible. But that is something that I learned, is just to not take everything at face value the way I used to. Because at that time I was trying to absorb everything. And then at this time, I'm trying to understand it with my own experiences as well.
That makes a ton of sense. And I guess in terms of, so we talked a bit about, learning, and adults, we think knowing everything when we're younger. It's funny. We find out that's actually not true when we get to be an adult. But for you, in terms of like, I guess, mentorship or how you actually like seek opinions in what you're doing, like, what does that look like? I guess, let's say counsel instead of opinions. I think that's a better way to look at it.
Oh, that's a great question. So I actually just had this conversation with a good friend of mine. So she is in sales. And she, as someone in her 20s, actually, she's very young. She went from zero to the second person in the company, so as the top salesperson,
Wow.
Yeah, she really wants to get to the top because she gets this little plastic trophy or something.
Nice. Everybody loves plastic trophies.
I know, and it's really funny. She's so then. So then when I go through, let's say I have a bad sales call or I have a really good sales call and I want to get feedback or anything, she is somebody that I would talk to in terms of sales, because she is someone who has measurable results in that field. So that is something that I have been learning to understand. Going back to the whole grown ups don't know everything. No one is going to know everything, but people or within your network are going to specialize in certain very specific high skill things. She was one of the only 2 people I knew in my whole life who was highly specialized in sales. And it was selling something that was very, very difficult too. It was, long sales cycles and everything. So then when I have dramatically good or bad stories, that is somebody that I would turn to, because she has a vast amount of experience that I myself, as a business owner, and every business owner, you can't do everything. You're not going to be good at everything, but you do have a list of people within your network or within new people you meet or anybody who would be able to give you advice on very specific things and situations. Just make sure not to ask the wrong person for the wrong things, because they'll lead you down the wrong path, right?
No, it's really interesting you say that, though, because I know I don't know if you heard this interview, but Lewis Howes not too long ago interviewed Jay Williams, that used to play for the Chicago Bulls. And he was saying that for himself, one of the things he was really dealing with is he wasn't seeking the right opinions, and he had this really bad injury that kept him from being able to play basketball anymore. So he kind of took at his life differently, and he has this strategy where he actually has what he calls his board of directors for his life. And he was how you were talking about, you have a sales expert. He has an expert in each area of his life that he could seek advice for. So to me, it's really interesting to kind of see how other people take a look at that and get their expert advice.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. And it's not like, you shouldn't ask your mom or your dad or your uncle for everything. You really do take it in terms of ask yourself, what are they good at? Why are they good at this? What is the measurable success that they've had in this particular thing? Why am I talking to this person for this thing?
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Assistagram.us. If you guys have not heard previous interview on this show with Zach Benson of Assistagram.us, I've had some amazing help from him the last couple months in being stuck at about 16,000 in my Instagram following. And if you really want to create a lot of traffic for the show like I've done a lot of it through Instagram. Working with Zach has been amazing, guys, over at Assistagram.us. He's helped me go from that 16,000 to where we were stuck to now 23,600. And he's doing some cool stuff over there. He has somebody on his team that's managing my account, so doing posting for me, and posting at the correct times of the day, and posting the correct type of content, working with the correct type of accounts, shout-outs, all that kind of stuff. And I don't have to do it because Assistagram has been doing it for me. You do see some of my posts over there every so often, but it's great to have them doing that and helping me grow that account by not really having to have my attention on it, because as a busy entrepreneur, we end up doing so many different things that I really don't have time to sit and remember to post on Instagram, since I can't really schedule things. So guys, you can check them out over at Assistagram.us, and there'll be a link in the show notes to this episode as well, but Assistagram.us. So I guess in that way, Sydney, let me ask you, for you, how do you, look at the value of the relationships in your life? Because I feel like, especially, let's say, in life and in business, how do you determine, for you, the value of those relationships? Because I feel like it's so difficult, especially in Silicon Valley, because there's so many people out there that, want to be around you or want to be near you or whatever, but you only have so many, units of attention to use. You know what I mean? So how do you determine where you're going to spend your relationship time?
Oh, so that is a very, very tricky question.
It's a tough question, right? I'm sorry. I just felt like we were going down that path, so I had to ask you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very tough question. So, I mean, time, I gotta say, is your only non-regenerating asset,
Hmm.
right? And how you gift other people with your time and how you share your experiences, whether it be professional or personal, is, I think, the highest compliment that they value you and you value them.
That makes sense.
So that's got to be like the highest level of it. So if you have like a time where you call your mom all the time, like I call her when I am usually walking to and from the office is a good time. And or you have monthly evaluations with your employees, which I also do. They give us feedback, we give them feedback. These are the kinds of things that I feel show value to your different kinds of relationships that you have. But in terms of meeting new people, that is absolutely tough,
Hmm.
So when we meet people, so I wrote an article called like the art of networking and the art of the ask as well. And so these kinds of things, I always teach, our new employees and things like that. What is your goal? Because whatever your goals is, it ties into what you truly value,
Hmm.
right? You do what you physically do what you actually value, and it shows that in your person. So when they are networking and they're like explaining what they do and things like that, you're not really explaining what you do on a day to day. You are explaining how you bring value to the person you think is in front of you in that particular position,
Mm.
right? That's really how you would
Yeah.
nutshell it. And then that they can respond in a meaningful
Hmm.
way, right? So I'm doing a networking event just because I came out of one recently, like a 4-day one. And so then, as quickly as you can, you try and explain to them, these are the kinds of people that we help, and this is how we bring value to them. And then they would usually respond in, I am like this, or I know somebody like this, or I don't know this, or we just keep talking about random things, and you end up going to like a Just for Laughs concert together later. You never know. This is actually true. This happened at my last networking event.
Oh my gosh. It's really funny though, because I didn't realize you had written articles about that before I asked you that question. So I guess that was really a perfect follow up for you, Sydney. so so I guess coming back to my next question, like if you had to take a look at everything you've done, you're doing a lot of different things where you're very multifaceted. What would you say is your biggest skill set? And in terms of that skill, where do you feel like you've created that skill?
I think that my biggest skill set has to be, and I don't know if it is truly a skill set, but it's something I do work on, resourcefulness. So, so resourcefulness, I think, is super important in terms of entrepreneurship, and it is just ways for you to either do things faster, better, or cheaper,
Mm.
right? Alternative ways to do anything. And so that's kind of how you fit more into a limited amount of time or a limited amount of budget, always.
Hmm.
One of the things that I noticed in the past couple years was a few of my startup friends, they have been asking me for, how can I do this? Where can I find this? And I don't mean like they're asking people. I mean, like they happen to know I am an expert at being resourceful. And so then I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to write an article. So I wrote an article. It was called the top 5 best free startup apps of 2018, where I write all these kind of like a Yelp review, but for each one.
Hmm.
And so, and that's how I have sent these things to them. And so being resourceful definitely helps me pack in a lot more in my day. And these are the kinds of things and learning curves that I also train new employees that are coming into to the workplace. Like, it's not just like download Outlook. It's really like take note of all of these different Google extensions. And this is why. And this is how you would do it video.
Right. No, absolutely. Then I guess on the other side of that, then Sydney, what do you feel like is the biggest thing that you've struggled with? And if you have a solution, that's awesome. But if not, that's fine too.
So I think that the biggest thing would still be that, you'll always have your strengths and weaknesses, and being able to kind of, in, I guess intuition is the right word. I don't always have the best intuition with like new people. And so I did an interview that was talking about my biggest startup fail. And so that was something that I still struggle with today, because like anything that you feel burned with in the past kind of still comes back, right? Like
Yeah.
can take time to overcome. It could take a lot of resources, anything. And so my biggest, to summarize it, my biggest startup fail was choosing the wrong co-founder. Ended up actually
I have a similar experience, so it's funny you say that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. Ended up actually breaking major parts of our technology. This was years ago. So this is at the beginning. But breaking major parts of our technology to the point where you cannot even do a demo. And I had demos with really big people. I had demos with the founder of Just for Laughs here in Canada. I had a demo with one of the biggest community influencers for startups here in Canada as well. And yeah, completely broke the product. So I could not even demo it. And I also couldn't change the meeting either. And so so that was a huge fail. And it actually put us into what's called technical debt for over 1 year. It took over 1 year for people to actually fix what he broke. And he was a PhD candidate in specifically, software technology. And he was referred to me by someone I trusted. That person now feels god awful about it. And yeah, so that was difficult to overcome. And I would say that was definitely my biggest startup fail. And it was at that time when I noticed that, okay, maybe my intuition really isn't as strong as other people's. And that's okay. It's just something that I need to learn and I need to overcome and I need to practice over and over again. Every time you have a new team member or you meet someone new, it's practice.
Absolutely. This has been a really, really cool conversation, Sydney. I think we've covered a lot of really cool topics, but just as we're kind of, winding down here, if we had to take a look and we're far in the future at everything you've created in your career and everything you've done, and we can sum up that legacy with a quote in your tombstone, what does that look like?
One of my favorite quotes is one that I wrote recently for an essay. It was for an entrepreneurship thing. And it was, you are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit and not an act. It's from Aristotle.
Absolutely. Well, Sydney, this has been a really, really great experience today. For those people listening, if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn more about VenturX, where is the best place to go?
You can go directly on our website at www.venturx.ca. So that's VenturX.ca.
Very cool. Well, Sydney Wong, thank you so much for hanging out with me today in the Create Your Own Life podcast.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with me and Sydney today. You can check her out over at venture with no E, X.ca. That's venturx.ca. Or you guys can get the show notes for this episode over at jeremyryanslate.com/450. Don't forget, guys, to subscribe for free in Apple Podcasts or Spotify to not miss another episode of the show. And while you're over there, leave us a 5-star review. I want to hear how it's going for you and also help more people to find us. Rock on, guys. Have an amazing weekend, and I'm going to catch you guys on Monday.
Now go out there and create your own life. Motivation may be great, but action is better. Get it done, my friends.